The name of my paper is Laughing All the Way to the Bank, Radio Advertising on Comedy Shows During the Golden Age of Radio. The thesis of the paper is that the marketing done by the great comedians of the golden age of radio was highly effective, profitable, and well received by the public. To put the research question simply, is how did this system of advertising work? This study is significant for at least three reasons. First, because radio marked the beginning of the mass media society in which everyone now lives. Second, radio marked a shift in the way that businesses advertise their products, from the hard sell to the soft sell. Third, some of the greatest entertainers of the 20th century were part of this radio advertising revolution and were directly responsible for how this advertising was written and delivered. Many of the primary sources used in this paper are the comedy shows themselves, which exist now in the public domain. Autobiographies, memoirs, and interviews were also great sources of information, as were newspaper articles from that era. Of course, there were lots of secondary sources as well. As for the findings, the golden age of radio lasted roughly 2 decades, the 1930s and the 1940s. The method of advertising developed during the golden age of radio was that one company or product would sponsor one single show. Now, Pepsodent was one of those products that first sponsored a radio show. The name of that show was Amos and Andy. Now, in spite of the fact that Pepsodent sponsored a comedy program, they did not use comedy in their advertising. They used the hard sell method of advertising, which had been the method of advertising in print for decades. The announcer describes what the product does and why it's so good. He gives detailed reasons as to why the listener should buy the product. Here's an example of what the listeners of Amos and Andy were treated to in the middle of the comedy.
By a remarkable achievement, the Pepsodent Laboratories have developed a polishing material that is twice as soft as the polishing materials commonly used in toothpaste. Teeth are given a higher polish, a brighter luster. Film stains are removed with absolute safety.
This type of hard sell stresses facts, reason, and logic. It is not an emotional appeal to the consumer, rather it appeals to the intellect. Now, in 1932, radio comedian Jack Benny turned the advertising world upside down by using the soft sell approach to advertising. He even took it a step further by injecting comedy into the commercial itself. Instead of the program being interrupted by the booming voice of the announcer, Jack Benny simply integrated the advertisement right into his monologue. Here's an example.
There's to be no advertising on this program during our sketches or while we're telling jokes. Remember that. Don't keep coming in with a commercial every minute.
Well, how do you mean, Jack?
Well, if I should happen to mention Los Angeles, California, don't you butt in and say Los Angelo. You see, it doesn't fit here.
Oh, I see, Jack. I'll only mention it in natural places.
Yes, and say, Wilson, we're just starting on this program. I notice you already have some of our new product on your neckties.
Well, you see, Jack, I bought 6 different colored neckties to match the 6 flavors of Jell-O.
I know, but you got strawberry flavor on an orange tie. You know.
All right, Jack, all right. Go ahead with the program.
This kind of advertising appealed to people's hearts, not their heads, and it ingratiated Jack Benny as someone that they could relate to. No one likes to listen to commercials, and he pokes fun at that. As time went on, and people loved the soft sell, the advertising even became part of the comedy sketches themselves, as in this example from The Bob Hope Show.
Now, what else could I do to impress the President, Chesterfield? What if I could get the boys in the band to come over and lie on my lawn so their bodies spell out they satisfied?
Well, if you wait till about 10:30, they'll all be in that shape anyway.
I hope this party turns out right, Don. I really want to impress Mr. Crampton. Do you think I've got enough Chesterfields around the room?
Well, Bob, really, I think you've overdone it. You got Chesterfields in the cigarette box, on the mantle, on the coffee table.
Well?
Do you think you ought to have them in the goldfish bowl, too?
Why not? The goldfish in the middle looks like Crosby.
Evening, Bob.
Hello there. You must be Mr. Crampton.
Yes. And I'd know you anywhere. How do you do, Miss Shaw?
Hey, Chief, Mr. Crampton. Hey, look at me. I'm smoking Chesterfields.
Yes, I know. But don't you think you ought to take them out of the package first?
And while we're alone, I want to tell you how proud I am to be working for a man like you. And it's not all business. I even have a sentimental attachment. You see, you look a lot like my father.
Well, that should work out fine. You look a lot like my mother.
The companies that embrace this, like General Foods and their product Jell-O, and Pepsodent, and Chesterfield cigarettes, made a ton of money, and some pretty funny comedy came about as a result. When TV came along around 1950, production costs were so much greater than radio that no one single company could afford to sponsor a single show. So that model of advertising went out with the golden age of radio.